Hi everyone, thank you for joining us on the second day of the Oxford Open Days. My name's Olivia and I'm one of the outreach officers at Magdalen College, and today we're going to do a Q&A with some of our lovely students who you can see before us, and we're going to answer your questions in live time. So please ask lots and lots of questions in the Slido box, which should be just next to where you're watching this video. No question is a stupid question, so please ask away. We'll be trying to answer questions as broadly as possible. So if you ask a subject-specific question, we'll try our best to answer it, but we'll also try and cover some other subjects as well to make sure everything is as relevant as possible to as many people watching. But first, we need to introduce the lovely students we have before us. So I will go around, and if you say your name, your year, your subject, and where you're from. So Daniel, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Daniel. I've just finished my first year at Magdalen. I've been studying history and politics, and I'm from Peterborough.
Bro. Anastasia?
Hi, my name's Anastasia. I've just finished my first year at Magdalen as well, and I study law with French law, and I'm from Leicester.
Bro. Erica?
Hi, I'm Erica. I've just finished my second year at Magdalen studying chemistry, and I'm from Wakefield in West Yorkshire.
And Natalie?
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie. I'm in my second year studying music, and I'm from Winchester.
Brilliant, thank you all. So to kick us off, someone has asked how much time the average student gets besides kind of doing work to have a social life. I think because you all do different subjects, it would be great to have you all answer this and just say a little bit about how your weekly workload works and how you manage to fit your social life into your work life. So Daniel, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the recommended amount is about 40 hours of study a week. So I make sure to basically meet my hours. I try and stick to office hours, about 10 till 6 is what I usually do Monday to Friday. And then that gives the rest of the week for social activities. In regards to kind of how the workload breaks down, so I have about 10 hours of contact time on average a week for my subject in the first year. And that was composed of about 5 hours of lectures, which this year were online. And then the rest of it was tutorials or classes. And then the rest of the time, so the 30 hours, that was mainly reading, preparing for my essays. I mainly had essays to write, but also one of the modules that I chose had problem sheets. So I'd spend 3 or 4 hours a week on average doing problem sheets for that particular module that I'd selected. In regards to kind of the social time around that, yeah, as I say, I have all the evenings during the week and also the weekend. And I'm no doubt we'll get onto this later, but I mean, there's tons of opportunities for social activities, particularly with tons of societies. So hopefully we can speak a bit more about that later on.
Brilliant, thank you. How about you, Anastasia?
I would say it was quite similar for me, but for us in law, we studied 1.5 subjects. So we would do one full subject a term and then half of another subject. And this would mean that my weeks look quite different. It wasn't always the same regimented kind of outlook on things. So one week I might have 2 essays due in, so I'd be a bit more busy and have to spend a bit more time on work and cut down on social life. Other weeks I'd only have 1 essay due in, so I'd have a lot more freedom that week. So it really just depended on the week. And yeah, I think, as Daniel said, it's quite nice to have this kind of 9 to 5 outlook, or 10 till 6, or just working around 8 hours a day, because that leaves the weekends free. Sometimes that's not possible, so I would do a little bit of work on Saturdays. I would normally try and keep Sundays a bit more free, just because I think 1 day a week is, just to keep it completely free is a very good thing to do. But it really just depends on the week for me on how much work I had and how I'd manage my time. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Erica?
So chemistry is a little bit different in that we have an awful lot of contact hours, which means I don't have a lot of freedom as to when I socialise, but I definitely do still get social time. So for me, I have about 30 to 40 contact hours a week. Generally speaking, it's about 32, I think. And then I do have to spend time on top of that doing work for the tutorials and problem sheets. And I still get plenty of time to socialise. I, like Anastasia, think it's really important to have a whole day off a week. And for me, that day was Wednesday, because weekends are a social construct. And I liked Wednesdays. but it depends on what you prefer. I preferred to work maybe a bit later on the evenings and still manage to have all of Wednesday off, and often I could sometimes take like half of a day at weekend off as well. And most evenings I'd spend like with my friends playing games, cooking tea together. I did a general like 10 till 6.
Brilliant, thank you. And finally, Natalie.
Yeah, so I think like some of the others, I try and keep my like work-life balance oriented around like a sort of 9 to 5 job, because that means that I have time to relax in the evenings. And I actually found that quite difficult to manage at the start. So it took me a couple of weeks in my first term to set out a good routine. But now I have a cut-off point where I don't work and I just do social things in the evenings, which is really nice. And then I try and have a bit of a break over the weekends. I think with music, it's slightly different in that there's a very large variety of of what you actually cover in the course. So you've got essays, but then you've also got things like composition and performance and other things as well. And some people find that a lot easier than others. So I quite like writing essays, but I found things like composition really difficult in my first year. So I'd spend maybe a whole day on my composition, but then maybe I don't know, maybe only a couple hours on my essay, because I found that a lot easier. And I think it just depends on like your experience and what you enjoy and what your kind of abilities are as well. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. That gave such a good overview of what different subjects' timetables are like, and also the important fact that you're not supposed to immediately know how to manage your workload. That's something you've got to learn and will develop over time. We might as well follow on with the kind of obvious question of what kind of societies do you do? What do you spend your spare time doing? Erica, do you want to start us off, and then anyone can just chip in with a few things that they get up to in their spare time?
So I don't partake in a lot of organised societies. I tend to prefer spending my time either like by myself in my room watching Netflix, which is underrated, and or just like chilling with my friends. Like I quite enjoy just playing card games and maybe watching a film together, doing like just general kind of chill, relaxing activities, but with people. In terms of societies, in my first year, I joined the Oxford Pole Dancing Society, which was a lot of fun. I was absolutely terrible at it, but it was good fun, and no one cares if you're bad at it because there's so many people there. And I also joined like the Assassin Society for a while, which is essentially you just shoot people with Nerf guns who also agreed to be shot with Nerf guns and are trying to shoot you back. It just shows that there's like weird and wonderful societies out there, and there honestly is a society for no matter what your interest is. There is someone out there who shares that interest and is probably an organised society too.
What about anyone else? Does anyone else participate in more organised stuff? But yeah, I agree. Netflix in bed is definitely underrated.
Yeah, I can come in very briefly just to say that I'm involved in TAF, which is like a theatre society, like the technicians. So in May, I did all the lighting design for a student theatre production. So I get involved in that. And as well, there's lots of opportunities for student representation as well. So I spend a lot of my time supporting the JCR, which is Magdalen College's undergraduate body. So I'm the secretary of that. And also spend some time, I'm the disability representative for the history faculty. So just communicating student feedback there. So that's what I kind of spend the majority of my time doing.
Great. Anyone else?
I'm quite similar to Eric in the sense that I quite like, chilling by myself or with friends and watching Netflix. But in my second term, I tried out some student journalism. I haven't really been that involved with societies this year, but next year I definitely want to get involved with a kickboxing society that is university wide, and also rowing, because I think a lot of people are into that in Oxford. And I know a lot of friends of mine at Magdalen have started rowing this term, so I think I really would like to try that. But there is literally anything for anyone as far as societies go, and I've joined quite a few law ones, so I've partaken in that. But yeah.
Great, that gave a nice spread of all the different things that people can do. So we've had a question. The that will require a little bit of explaining, but do you think that colleges which are highest on the Norrington table, and especially academic, would be A, less fun, and B, harder to get into? So a little bit of context for anyone who doesn't know, the Norrington table is an internal Oxford thing where that just looks at the results that people get in their finals and therefore ranks the colleges. From just as a little precursor, I don't think it's necessarily something that we take particularly seriously. I don't know if it's something that students really think of. When I was a student, I know I didn't really think about it at all. It wasn't really in effect. But Magdalen is sometimes quite near the top of this, which does make people maybe concerned about the idea that we might be less fun or harder to get into. So harder to get into, I'll just cover that one, and then you guys can say whether you think Magdalen's fun or not. But harder to get into, so we have something called the pooling system at Oxford, and it essentially means that the strongest applicants who apply for each subject every year should be offered a place, because what we'll do is, no matter if one college was oversubscribed for one subject, we'll move you around. So if we had lots of chemistry applicants one year at Magdalen, lots of really good chemistry applicants that we couldn't interview all of, we'll move them around. And then during the whole process, you might be interviewed at different colleges anyway, because different tutors like to see different students, and it's just part of our process. And it essentially gives people the best shot. So when you think about applying to a particular college, I always think you should really think of it as kind of not applying to the college, but specifying a preference of which college you would prefer to live at. That being said, do you think that Magdalen is less fun than other colleges? Do you think Magdalen is fun? Anastasia, do you want to do you want to answer first?
I think Magdalen's definitely fun. I've never thought of it as anything otherwise. I think it is quite academic, like especially amongst the Magdalen lawyers, it can be quite competitive because everyone wants to do well, but there is still a very friendly environment. You know, we all like share notes and hang out together and go to, you know, socials together. And I think the better reputation would be that we're an academic college, but that not that we're a non-fun college, because there is so much to do and so many interesting people to meet. And yeah, I would never call Magdalen not fun. Every single day at Magdalen that I've spent this year, I've enjoyed it completely. So yeah, it's a very fun college.
Anyone else? Or just all in agreement that Magdalen is fun? Yeah, no, lots of nods, brilliant. So to jump back to societies, someone's asked a follow-up question about if you join a society or club in your own college, or do you join societies from across the university or from other colleges? Daniel, do you maybe want to just explain a little bit about how college and university societies work?
Yeah, so I mean, there are university and there are college societies. I mean, in regards to college societies, I'm just thinking of a few. So, I mean, I was involved in the Addison Society, which is like a current affairs and debating sort of like discussion group that happens once a week. And I was going to that and I quite enjoyed that. We also have like a film club, I think, and we also have lots of sports teams as well. No doubt there's other college societies that I've missed. And if you do come to Magdalen, there is during Freshers Week usually a college society's Freshers Fair. So you had to find out more about what's on offer at the time. And there's always opportunities to start your own society, whether it be at a college level or university level. So if there isn't something that you're specifically looking for, then definitely you can set it up, get a few friends involved, and there is a process for doing that. In regards to university societies, yeah, I mean, as we've said, there's tons to get involved with. I think of the university website, you can see all the options on offer. And, you know, there's like theatre and sport and music, and you know, there's tons of things I've missed. I mean, we have, I think it's it's quite a famous climate society you have at Oxford, and they've been running like a school of climate change, if that's what you're interested in. There's lots of advocacy groups as well, and there's like cultural societies. So I went to, even though I'm not American, I went to an American society social a few weeks ago, which was at Five Guys. So yeah, there's tons and tons of societies to get involved with. And just because you sign up to something in Freshers Week doesn't mean you can't get involved later down the line.
Great, thank you. So someone's asking about the food, a very important question to be asking. So they've said, what is the menu like at college? Are there vegetarian and vegan options available? Natalie, I'm not sure how much you eat in hall if you do, but do you want to talk a little bit about college food?
Yeah, so I think I eat in college like a fair amount, yeah. I wasn't that good at cooking when I started university, so it was a really nice way to kind of meet people and actually eat properly still at the same time. Yeah, so we have breakfast, lunch and dinner. It's quite it's like very good value for money. I don't go to breakfast and lunch, but like dinner in hall, as in not formal hall, which is the kind of formal dinners, but the like normal dinner time. I think the meals are around kind of £4-ish, and you get that's if you get kind of like a full meal and then a dessert as well. And I'm vegetarian, and they've had really good vegetarian options, especially this year. I think they kind of improved it a bit. In the past, I'd say perhaps the variety wasn't quite as good, but now it's like recently got a lot better, I'd say. And I like all the food, and I look forward to going there and meeting friends in the evenings.
Yeah, as someone else who's vegetarian, the veggie food has got a lot better. It's quite noticeable. Does anyone else use one of the college kitchens at all? I want to talk a bit about that.
I mean, I used my kitchen in the first term because I kind of balanced eating in hall and cooking in our kitchen. But yeah, I mean, you get everything that you need. You get a microwave, a hob, a kettle, sink, everything. So yeah, and there's quite a good amount of storage space. I shared a kitchen with 8 people. And yeah, we always had enough space for everything. And you get a small fridge, as well as getting a mini fridge in your room as well. So I think there is everything you need. Our kitchen was quite small, and I know that it just depends on where you live and how big your kitchen is, but there is always, everything that you need and more than enough for you.
Brilliant, thank you. So someone's asked a specific biochemistry question. We don't have a biochemist with us today, but I think as a chemist, Erica might just be able to cover it, but we'll also broaden it out a little bit. So they have asked, what opportunities are there in biochemistry from the college? So things like grants for lab placements. So Erica, I'm going to pass to you to talk about maybe the science side, but maybe then if someone else wanted to chip in about just what opportunities college provides, if there are any grants, and if you've ever made use of them or maybe plan to. Erica, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so as a chemist, I'm not 100% sure what the biochemistry course looks like, but for me, my entire 4th year is a placement. And there's a lot of support from college in terms of financially helping me with the placement, in that so my terms become a lot longer. They become 13 weeks rather than the 8-week terms Oxford normally has. And I get financial support to help me with the extra rent that's going to cost me. And also I know other chemists have looked into spending their placement abroad, and Magdalen have a travel grant of around £1,000. It's 1,000 and a bit, I'm not sure on the exact number, to help with kind of plane costs and like moving all your stuff over there and luggage and that kind of thing. And you can apply for that, and as far as I'm aware, when it's like placements and things that are required by your course, you're very likely to get the money, which is a big help, and every student can access this once during their degree. For me, my lab placement is looking like it's going to be in Oxford, so there won't be much like kind of international support I'll be needing with that, but college will support you, and there's a student support fund as well, which anyone can apply to regardless of whether you're on placement or not. I applied this year just because of financial changes at home due to the pandemic, and you kind of just send in an application along with a couple of bank statements to prove that you're not lying, and then just they'll send you some money back, and that's like a one-off to help you. You don't have to pay it back, and it's kind of just there to help you focus on your studies without having to worry about being financially behind other people.
Thank you. That was a really comprehensive summary of a lot of the support that's offered in college. Does anyone else have any thing that they can think of that college helps support with them, or something that's like specifically special about their subject at Magdalen?
Yeah, so I think the two things I'd mention very briefly is the book grants, first of all, which have been very, very helpful, particularly this year. I've been able to access £300 worth of book grants this year, which has really allowed me to keep studying with the impacts of the pandemic. And the other thing to mention for my subject is that the politics faculty has a centre called the Q-Step Centre, which is for political analysis. And actually, if you want to do a dissertation in that subject or do some work experience in data analysis, that so they'll actually offer over £1,000 worth of financial support usually. So there's definitely a lot of funding available.
I could just add one thing for music if you want. So there's a music scholarship for people who actually study music, but then there's also a kind of bursary for people who aren't studying music, and I think it's for undergrads. And I have one of the music scholarships for music students, and that's been really helpful because it's enabled me to kind of pay for lessons and courses which I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And I know the other people who've had it have found it really, really helpful as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, lots of different support in lots of different ways, and that's a big part about college life is the fact that we're here. You know, there's lots of different people here to support you with whatever it is that you're struggling with or need help with. So to shift things a little bit to the application process, someone has asked, is there normally only one interview to get into Oxford or multiple interviews? So Anastasia, do you want to start us off by just talking about your interview experience?
So for law, there are normally 2 interviews, but because I applied for law with French law, I had 3. So my third one was the language interview, just a short conversation with a native speaker just to prove that I've got a good enough fluency level. So my first 2 interviews were for law, and they were quite different actually. So the first interview, we spoke about my personal statement for half of it. So I was quizzed on my EPQ, like they just asked me questions about different things I'd mentioned in my personal statement. So very important to tell the truth and not to lie on it, because they will, ask you questions on that. And then they gave me a piece of statute and posed me different problem questions and asked me to reason through it. And the important thing is that they're not looking for the right answer. They're just looking for you to prove, like just to reason yourself and explain what's going on in your head, because obviously they know that you're not going to know all the answers. They're just looking for you to explain yourself, really. And then my second interview was a bit more stressful. They gave me a judgment of a case, and they just asked me questions about it, and that was the entirety of the interview. They didn't really talk about my personal statement again. They just went through that. So it really varies, and I think different subjects have it quite differently, but that was my experience with law.
Erica, from a science perspective, do you want to talk about what your interviews were like?
So I had 2 interviews at Magdalen, and then I had to stay for an extra day to see if I was called for an interview at another college. I personally wasn't, but a lot of the other chemists were. For example, my friend Bianca got called to an interview at St. Peter's College. So that was 2 interviews at Magdalen, and then 1 or maybe not at another college. The 2 I had at Magdalen were of the kind of 2 separate sides of chemistry. So I had one that was more on the mathsy physics side. Sorry, I muted myself. One that was more on the side of kind of like what you'd think is traditional chemistry, so like reactions and mechanisms and that kind of thing. I quite enjoyed my interviews. I think it was just a time for me to talk about like things that I got a deeper understanding of chemistry in them, I guess, in that they asked me questions that I'd not thought of before. They were about the A-level content, but kind of taking it further and like forcing me to think critically about it. And they really do help you through it, and it's totally okay to say you don't know something. But like compared to Anastasia, I didn't get asked anything about my personal statement at all. It wasn't mentioned at all in the interview.
How about Natalie, as a music student? I imagine you had a different experience again.
Yeah, it was quite different. So I had 3 interviews and then an oral test, which was just kind of like a singing exercise with everyone, and then an audition as well. So we in the first interview, think this was probably my favorite one. I mean, I didn't hate any of them. I think there was one that was I kind of came out of it thinking, oh no, I haven't got it in at all. But I think lots of people do have that experience. But anyway, yeah. So the first one we kind of discussed my personal statement and my submitted the work that I'd submitted, which was just an essay and some composition. And then for the second one and the third one, we had about an hour to look through some work, and then we just kind of got asked questions about it. I think one piece of work was an article, and then the other one was a piece of music, and we just kind of described it and we talked about it, and it was actually really, really interesting, especially talking to the tutors about stuff that I hadn't really seen before. It was a little bit stressful, but I really enjoyed it, and it was a really good experience. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. We might as well stay with the theme of applications briefly and talk a little bit about personal statements, which have been mentioned that you might be asked about it in your interview. So, make sure that you're very happy with what you've put in your personal statement. Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about how you put your personal statement together, what was in it, and if you have any tips?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of the process of putting together my personal statement, I kind of just explored my interests and went from there. So I kind of had a list that I kept of like all the super curricular activities I'd done. So all the ones I thought would be relevant and I'd want to show my personal statement. And then when I wrote my first draft, my advice is just get something on paper. Don't expect it to be good, but it's just good to get over that initial hurdle and just put something down. And try and keep a copy of all your drafts as well, because then you can keep progress of how you're doing. And actually, I found that there were some things I cut one of the earlier drafts that actually I've re-added later on because it stuck to the theme that I was trying to focus on. So in regards to kind of what I included, the vast majority of my statement was kind of looking at Brexit and neoliberalism because they were the two interests I really had. And I was making links between some of the different content that I had, which I think is something I definitely recommend, about comparing different viewpoints and picking out why you find particular parts interesting or why they challenged your preconceived views. So that was kind of what I did for the most of it, and also showing my understanding of current affairs. And the final part I did was actually linked to the history coursework I'd done. So I was doing about the Holocaust, and I did a viewpoint comparison of a few different interpretations from different authors, kind of to show understanding of historiography, which is quite important to history. So that was kind of what I included in my statement. The vast majority of it was books, but I also used some lectures, and as well, if you want to use television programs or podcasts, as long as they focus on the topic, then that's the sort of things to include, really. In terms of advice, I'd say pick the things that you want to be asked about. Definitely pick your strengths and the things that really, really interest you. Show you've gone beyond the curriculum. So even with the history one, I'd done some more reading beyond just what I needed to do for the coursework to show that I was really interested in the subject. I'm just trying to think kind of other advice. Don't use quotes. I mean, that's quite an obvious one, but you've got a really limited word count. So really try and make sure every word counts. And I'd also say as well, see your personal statement as an argument still see it as an essay, but you're arguing why you should be selected and why you think you're the right candidate for this particular subject. I think the other thing as well, just to briefly add on extracurricular activities, is that Oxford aren't really looking at those. They're interested in the academics. So if you are going to include them, because other universities do look at them, they'll make sure it's like less than 20% of your statement. And in the way that I included mine, because I was interested in drama and theatre, is I ran a history workshop for drama students because they was preparing for a written exam they had for their GCSEs about Blood Brothers. So I linked that to some of the other stuff I mentioned earlier about neoliberalism and Brexit. And in that case, I was focusing on the history of Thatcher in that workshop. So I kind of linked my extracurricular activities to the supercurricular stuff that I wanted to show.
That was very, very comprehensive. Thank you. Does anyone have any tips that they want to add or something that they found helpful for their subject?
I just wanted to mention, Daniel said not to use quotes, and I actually did in my personal statement. I mean, it is advised not to, but I think as long as you're ready to talk about it, then I don't see why not. Like, I actually started off my personal statement with a quote, which is quite risky. If anyone's seen Legally Blonde, I used Aristotle's quote, "The law is reason free from passion." So that was like one of the first points that the tutors interviewing me asked me about, like, to explain that quote and what it means, and then they just asked me questions following from that. So I think if you do decide to be bold and use a quote, just make sure you can reasonably talk about it. But I think, yeah, just run it by your teachers, see if you're comfortable with it, and use it, because the advice is not to use quotes, but I think it quite helped my personal statement. But I think, just following on what Daniel said, I think just it's important to show things related to your subject that show your like interest and passion for it, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for students who they are happy to teach for 3 to 4 years, or however long your course is. So like I included different like things that I'd done, like reading around my subject. I'd been to a few court hearings, and just small things like that show that you're really interested about your subject. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point about quotes, is that you clearly had heard of this quote beforehand, knew about it, and it had some genuine impact on you and your like interest in the subject. I'm making assumptions, but from what you've said, that sounds like that's how you felt. But if you are just looking to find a way to start your personal statement that you think will make you look clever, and you're like, oh, I'll Google a quote, then that's not the right thing to do. As Daniel says, that then you're just wasting words. You're actually using someone else's words when you could be thinking of your own. So if you are going to use a quote, like Anastasia says, as long as if you knew the quote prior to trying to write your personal statement, then I think you're just about okay. And if you could have a genuine conversation about the meaning of that quote. Also, your quote sounds quite short, but some people will start their personal statement with a quote that spans 2 lines, and you might only, you've only got one side of A4. So it really is about making the statement personal to you. So if you have to Google some fancy quote, then that's not about you at all, and you're not even using your own words. But it is really hard to start personal statements, and not to do a plug, but I'm going to plug the personal statement workshop that happens to be on the Magdalen College YouTube channel. So it's a really comprehensive workshop, and it talks about how to open and close your personal statement, how to cut down word counts. So I would recommend people go and have a look at that if you are struggling. So to move back onto kind of student life, someone's asked what the average day in the life of a student is. They're thinking about ARC and ANTH, but just any general advice would be useful. Now, I know that the first thing you're all going to say is it varies day by day, but if you can have a rough shot at saying maybe what your average day might look like. Natalie, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I find that I definitely work better in the mornings, and then I kind of lose energy towards the end of the day. So I try to get up fairly early, and then I'll just I don't know, maybe drink tea and have breakfast for an hour, and maybe go on a walk. And then my lectures usually start around 9 or 9:30. And then they can continue until about 12:30. So I'll have them, and then I'll have lunch. And usually I'll have lunch with friends, or I'll just kind of make a sandwich and eat it in my room if I'm a bit rushed. But sometimes we have a college dog called Scrumpy, and sometimes I'll walk the dog with friends, which is really nice. Yeah. And then in the afternoon, I usually have tutorials, or sometimes I have piano lessons, but they're a bit more rare. So yeah, if I have them in the afternoons, I'll do a bit of practice, or I'll kind of look over my notes. But if I don't have tutorials or lessons or classes, I'll just read for essays or write the essays. And then in the evenings, I'll have dinner, usually around, I don't know, maybe 6:30ish. And then I try to kind of not do much work or any work beyond that point, and I just do society stuff, or I'll kind of just socialize with friends and watch TV, which is the best part of the day.
Erica, what about you from a science perspective?
So I have 2 lectures every morning from 9 till 11. When they were in person, they took me about 20 minutes to walk there. So I generally wake up about 8, have tea and toast, and then head off to my lectures. Now they're online, I tend to wake up at 5 to 9 and just turn my laptop on. But that takes me all the way up till 11, and then I tend to take off the time between 11 and lunchtime, just because I've just done two hours of lectures, and it gets quite intense if you're taking in too much information at once. So I'll go on a walk, I'll chill, sometimes I take Scrumpy for walks too. That's always good fun. And then at lunchtime, I just grab some lunch with a friend or by myself. And then after lunch, I tend to either do tutorial work or go to a tutorial. I tend to avoid doing it in my room. I like to keep rest and work separate. So I'll leave my room to go do the work. I'll do it in the library or in a coffee shop, or sometimes I'll sit outside. just generally, if I try and work in my room, I end up like procrastinating because my room is where I rest, not where I work. And then after tea, like Natalie, I just tend to chill, sit with friends, watch TV, go to bed early. I don't know, whatever I feel like. That's provided it's not a lab day. I do labs 2 days out of the week, which are like 9 till 6, I guess, labs. And then after a full day of labs, you're kind of shattered. So I just come home, have some food and collapse.
Great. Thank you both for sharing a rough day in the life of. So we've had a question about stress level, which I'm going to add a little bit to. But it's what is the general stress level for students? And then I'd also add, is there ways that you can get help? So someone asked for AMH. So Daniel is our history and politics student. They will probably be closest to ancient and modern history. So do you want to talk about how you manage stress, what's your general stress level, and where you would go to help if you needed it?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say I'm not actually that stressed, to be honest, most of the time. I think my first week was quite stressful because I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I've got an essay I've got to do in 3 days. I don't really know how to use the library system and get books. What on earth am I doing? This is all taking far too long. So I think that, in the first few weeks where you're still getting used to things, it can seem a bit more stressful because you're not quite sure exactly what you're doing and how much of the reading you need to do. Because in my case, I get set a reading list of like 17 books and I'm not expected to read that much. So in that case, it was just about going to tutors and clarifying, okay, how much of this are you actually expecting me to read? And for example, I don't need to read full books. It's just particular chapters that are relevant to the question. So yeah, generally I'm not that stressed, to be honest, because I've kind of got a routine. And the other thing as well I do is I don't have like a strict timetable, but I kind of know the work has to be done by this time. And I know now that I can get through the required reading I need to do in about 2 days, and I can write and edit the essay in less than a day. So I try and give each essay about 3 days. And then that way, I try and, as I say, like bound it in that time. So if I haven't quite done as much reading as I'd like to, I still try and move on at the end of the time so that I've got enough time to do all the other work that I need to do. So yeah, I'm not really that stressed, to be honest. I think, to be honest, some of the societies and things I do can get a bit more stressful than actually the academic work I do. In regards to kind of the support available, so I mean, I quite like going to the welfare teas. They usually happen on Sundays and they've been in person. That's just been a good way to get out of the room for an hour and see some of the people from college, going for walks with friends. Sometimes walk around like Addison's Walk, which is like the college grounds. I find that a good way of relieving stress. In regards to some of the other like more formal mechanisms, so we have a college mentor and she can be quite helpful if you're having issues scheduling things, for instance, and actually she's been quite supportive of me when I was recovering from an illness. So that's definitely a resource. We have a welfare dean, so they're in charge of welfare for students, and I had a concern I needed to raise about my disability, and he dealt with it within about 5 minutes of me sending an email. So that's a great resource there. The undergraduates, we have this thing called the JCR, which is the Junior Common Room, so it represents all undergraduates, and we have a welfare team, so you can always get in touch with them. And we also have peer supporters. So again, they're undergraduates who've undergone training to support other students, so you can contact them. And there's tons of other welfare resources I haven't mentioned as well. So there's definitely lots and lots of support if you need it. And you also have a personal tutor who's not in your subject. So in my case, mine is a music tutor. So if I have any other concerns as well, I can go to him.
Brilliant, thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add about general stress levels or welfare at college? Or was it covered comprehensively? Go on.
I think Daniel basically covered everything, but I just want to say that your tutors are also a good source of welfare. Like my tutors are, one of them's the senior dean and the other's the vice president, and that might seem quite daunting. You're thinking, oh my goodness, they'll never have enough time for me. But I, during the term, so I just sent them an email with the subject line saying chat ? And then they would just organize a quick Teams chat or an in-person chat. And it's just quite nice because they're people that you work with and they know about your workload and what you might be dealing with. So it's quite nice to have someone who just knows what you're going through and can support you in that way. So I found that to be quite helpful. And as for stress levels, I think generally it's been okay, but as Daniel said, like at the beginning it's quite stressful because you're thinking, how can I manage to do all this work in this small amount of time? But you kind of just grow into it and you evolve into the Oxford lifestyle and you get used to it quite quickly. So it might seem quite scary at the beginning, but you'll adapt and it'll all be fine.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've had a question specifically about law, but again, we'll broaden it out, but I'll throw it to you first, Anastasia. So do you recommend applying to Magdalen if they're applying to law? But then it would just be great to hear if you all would recommend applying to Magdalen, or maybe why you applied to Magdalen if you did. So Anastasia, do you want to cover that from a more law perspective?
Sure. So Magdalen's really great for law. We have our own law library, which is accessible only by law students. You get a key at the start of term, which you get to keep, which is quite nice. It's like a nice secluded space full of law books, and yeah, it's just where you can express your inner law nerd. But as for the kind of reputation, I think I've heard a lot and still keep hearing that Magdalen's really like a really strong college for law, and that there are a lot of barristers' chambers which in which there are quite a few Magdalen law alumni in. So that's always quite a good thing to hear. And as well, we've had many important alumni who went to Magdalen, such as Lord Denning, Lord Sumption, Justice Breyer, and even our own president, Diana Rose, who's a QC. So there are a lot of strong law alumni who attended Magdalen, which is, I think, what gives it such a strong law reputation. And generally, the teaching is fantastic. We've got some of the best tutors who you might be taught by. So yeah, I would strongly recommend Magdalen. It's very, very good for law. And it's also quite close to the law faculty. It's like a 5-10 minute walk. So it's in a good position and covered by good teaching.
Brilliant, thank you. Natalie, what about you? Would you recommend applying to Magdalen? Did you apply originally to Magdalen?
Yeah, so I did apply originally to Magdalen. I think I only visited around 3 colleges, and Magdalen was the last one I visited. And I think I had a tour and with a student, and the student was incredibly helpful. And I think as soon as I kind of left the college, that I decided that I was going to apply as my first choice. I think I definitely recommend applying to Magdalen for music, just because, well, the reason why I applied was because not only because my positive experience at the open day, but also because they have lots of kind of resources for musicians, as we've kind of talked about a little bit. So they have the music scholarships, and then they also have like quite good practice facilities in college. And because it's quite a large college, there's usually someone who you can also always find to kind of I don't know, like accompany you for something, or just like play together in a group, and you can set up lots of different things, which might be a little bit harder if you go to a smaller college where there's fewer students or fewer people who are interested in music. Yeah.
Erica, I know you didn't apply to Magdalen. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you found arriving at a college that you didn't originally apply for?
Yeah, so I applied to Worcester originally because Worcester was my link college, which means that that's the college that I spent overnight there at the open days. I never actually looked around Magdalen at the open days. I kind of never trekked over to that side of town. When I got the email to interview at Magdalen, it was a shock, but at the same time, like I was excited that I got an interview, and I was quite lucky in that my interviews were in person, so I did actually get to come look around Magdalen at the interviews. I stayed in Magdalen's grounds, and I got to like experience Magdalen and Eaton Hall. And once I'd done that, I kind of started to think, oh, actually, yeah, I feel comfortable here. I feel happy here. I would be happy getting into here. So rather than being like upset that I didn't get into my first choice college, I was kind of happy I got to experience 2 colleges in a sense. And now, like, everyone who ever applied to one college and got into another will tell you that the one they got into is their favourite college. And I now think Magdalen is my favourite college, and I couldn't imagine myself at Worcester. I couldn't imagine myself anywhere but Magdalen. So like just goes to show, like, don't be disheartened if you don't get into your first choice college. All of them are amazing, and all of them will have so much support for you.
Great, thank you. And Daniel, why did you apply to Magdalen if you did?
Yeah, so I applied to Magdalen. I looked around at a number of colleges. I was quite keen that there was accommodation for 3 years of undergraduate degree, so I found that quite reassuring that Magdalen offered that. And also it's just the grounds, and I also found the student ambassadors to be really helpful. So yeah, they were kind of the reasons I applied to Magdalen. The other thing to say as well is actually history and politics isn't offered at all colleges. Magdalen do offer it. I mean, actually, I think we have one of the larger cohorts. I mean, in my year, we have 3 students. And usually, I think there's only 1 or 2 usually at most colleges. So I think that that's also a benefit as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So someone's asked how touristy is the college? And I guess also, does that impact on your life in any way? Erica, do you want to cover that one?
So I was only impacted by tourists in my, the only time I ever thought about it was kind of the last few weeks of Trinity, when it got, so like the last month or so from now, it's been very warm, it's been very sunny, and so Magdalen had quite a lot of tourists in it. I wouldn't say they particularly bothered me in any way. It was more just I was walking around and there were a lot of people like sat on the lawns that I didn't recognise, and kind of a few crying kids that really got on my nerves, and I kind of wanted to be like, just shut up. But other than that, they really don't bother me that much. Throughout the year, generally, I didn't see many tourists. That might have been a result of the pandemic, but even in my first year before the pandemic was anything we ever thought would happen, I didn't really see any tourists. The porters are there to like let them in, and they like monitor how many tourists are coming in, so we'll never be like overrun with tourists. The porters will always like stop letting people in before it gets mad, and I have actually complained to the porters about some tourists before, and they will come straight out and have a word with them, or even like kick them out of college if it's necessary. They shouldn't be impacting you in any way, and if they are, there's people out there who'll sort it.
Brilliant, thank you. To stick with you, Erica, because we had a follow-up question about the placements for chemistry. So for a chemistry degree, if you know where around the world can you go for a placement? Is there a list of possible countries? Also, is there a placement in a university abroad? Is the placement abroad in an industry or a university?
So the way the placements work at Oxford is a bit different than most chemistry degrees, in that at Oxford you can really only do your placement with an Oxford research group, just so that they used to let people go into industry, but they had like reports of people just being like taken advantage of and used to make like cups of tea and stuff, which isn't what we're wanting. We want to be fully immersed and fully actually doing the research ourselves. So you can join any chemistry research group, and also the one I'm quite fancying for my placement is joining the School of Environment and Geography as a chemistry student. So you can go to different departments, but you kind of have to stay with a research group in Oxford. But a lot of those research groups have partners in other countries. For example, one of my tutors leads placements in Berlin, because that's where a lot of his research actually happens. When people tell you that you need to stay with an Oxford research group, they think that means you stay in Oxford, but actually the research that happens with people at Oxford University happens all around the world. And we also have a Berkeley exchange. If you're wanting to go into chemical biology, the biology exchange happens with, I think it's Berkeley University in America, and we swap a couple of students every year, and that's quite a standard thing that happens. You choose your placement about now, so like the summer after your second year to the first term of third year, you start looking into your placements, and you find a supervisor, and then that supervisor will be able to tell you like what the opportunities to go abroad are with them, or you can maybe look into another supervisor if you are set on going abroad.
Brilliant, thank you. So what is the Magdalen community like? Natalie, can you start us off? Natalie, can you hear us? think there may be a problem with the connection. Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about the Magdalen community?
Yeah, sure. So I think the Magdalen's got a really good community. I mean, we've already mentioned about how while people, all want to do well academically, actually there's been lots of note sharing going on, I've found, in my subject, and working together if we've faced issues. So I think there's definitely that. But there's also the non-academic side of things. So I mean, there's lots of events going on. So students organise lots of things. So I mentioned like the welfare teas, which happen every week. But actually, we've had some other events as well. Like a few weeks ago, we had an online escape room that was in a household. We've had some quizzes. And there's been tons of other events as well, which I haven't mentioned. Like we had a few pizza nights last term. So there's lots of things going on. And I mean, hall's another great space as well. It's great to catch up with friends. So I think definitely, yeah, there is a sense of community and people working together. And as I say as well, there's lots of support if you are struggling. So I think that that's really, really positive.
I can see lots of nodding. Anastasia, do you have anything to add?
Not much more than Daniel said. I just think people might think, oh, Magdalen's a big college, therefore the community feel might get lost, but I've never felt that way. There is a really strong sense of community and a strong sense of like oneness, and it's quite easy to make friends. Everyone's really nice and friendly. As I said, like I lived in a household of 8 and we became quite close, and it's really easy to find the people that you will vibe with or that are quite similar to you and have similar interests. So I think, yeah, I never worried about that at all during my time at Magdalen.
Brilliant. Does anyone have anything to add before we kind of fire into our final question that I always ask at the end of any Q&A? No, brilliant. Okay then. So we are coming to the end of our hour. Thank you everyone for asking your questions. But I always think it's nice to end on what would you say to a year 12 student who is thinking about applying to Oxford, but maybe is not so sure. What would you say to try and encourage them? I'm not sure if we've got you back, Natalie, but do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So this probably sounds a bit kind of cliche, but I'd say just go for it. I think if you're really interested in your subject and it's something you're passionate about, then I'd say go for it, because I was quite unsure about applying. I only really decided fairly last minute that I was going to apply to Oxford, and I'm so glad that I did, and especially Magdalen as well. I think it's easy to kind of be put off by lots of like stereotypes and presumptions that aren't true a lot of the time. And if you're interested in your subject, and I'd say that's the most important thing. So just kind of read around your topics and find some sort of like niche that you're really, really interested in, which is kind of what I tried to do. And that was really helpful for me. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Anastasia, what about what would you say?
I would say exactly the same as Natalie, but to add a little bit of diversity to my answer, probably just to treat every test as if it's like an actual exam, because I found that I did that throughout my secondary school and throughout my college. And well, with the pandemic like coming up, we never actually got to sit our exams, so we had to rely on teacher put grades. So I think by working hard, I showed to my teachers that I am quite serious about the subjects I did at A level, and that, like I treated every mock exam as if it were my actual exam, and I got good grades. So I think that really impacted positively. And I mean, obviously none of us could have predicted the pandemic, but it worked out in my favor. So I think that's really important, because it just gets you in the correct mindset for Oxford. Like you kind of, if you want to do well, and if you want to get in and show that you're passionate about your subject, I think you have to work hard towards it. So I would just say treat every test as if it's your actual one. But then again, at the same time, don't burn yourself out. Just try and find this work-life balance, because it's really important to look after yourself. Like if you burn out, then there's no point in continuing. So try to find a balance and treat everything seriously from the get-go.
That's a really good top tip, actually. I don't think I've heard that one before. Erica, what about your top tip?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. My top tip would be start thinking about it now. Like, you clearly are thinking about it because you're here. But as far as I'm aware, the deadline for UCAS applications is kind of mid-October. So start writing your personal statement if you haven't already. Start talking to your teachers if you have a teacher for this in the subject that you're wanting to apply for, or even like a personal tutor or something, depending on your school. Let them know that you're considering. They will probably be able to find some resources for you, and take advantage of every opportunity given to you. If someone says, oh, I know a bit about Oxford, here's some advice, or I know, or like you find some resources online, or like Olivia said, the YouTube channel with personal statement workshops, like do as much of research as you can and really go for it and throw yourself into it. If this is something that you want, then try your best, and honestly, the chances are it'll work in your favor either way. No matter what you end up doing, will be something that you love.
Yeah, brilliant. What about you, Daniel? I know a lot's been said already.
Yeah, a lot of I echo everything that's been said. I think as well, just to bear in mind, absolutely do try your best with it and kind of try and do your best at every single stage. But at the same time, bear in mind that you do have other options, and those options can also be very, very good. So almost see it as an adventure and opportunity, and see every stage you get as something you wouldn't have had if you hadn't applied in the first place. But also bear in mind, as I say, you have other things you can do. So don't see Oxford may be your dream, but at the same time, bear in mind you do have other routes. And as well, just take advantage of everything that's available. I mean, as well, some of us are on the ambassador platform, which you can find on the college website. So if you've got any further questions as well, do get in touch with us about anything else you want to learn more about.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. They were fantastic top tips, and you actually take some of mine. I was going to say, don't be afraid to ask questions. I know sometimes people get a bit scared about sending a question to an admissions at email or something, or something on the Oxford website. But all you're ever going to do is send an email to someone who is sat at the other side of a screen who wants to try and help you. So if you do have any further questions about Oxford, take advantage of the open day, take advantage of the resources that we've all kind of just spoken about. Email people with your questions. If you're in the middle of an application and you experience extenuating circumstances, let us know about those, where the whole Oxford and the process it's made by its people. Oxford is made by its people, and so is the process, and we want to help you, and we want to give everyone the absolute best shot of getting in if that's something that you choose you want to do. So on that note, thank you all for joining for the Q&A today, and for helping with the open day, and for giving a really amazing set of answers. So everyone listening, I hope this has been really helpful, whether you're listening live or whether you're playing this back at a later date. And do just get in touch with us if you've got any more questions, and consider Oxford and Magdalen if you think that might be the right choice for you. So have a brilliant rest of the open day. And thank you very much.